Welcome to the Bobcast with your hosts, Bob Nucky and Shane McClay. Join in the Bobcast community as we discuss life, business, health, death, and everything in between. The Bobcast is proudly brought to you by Moisture Cure. Moisture Cure, the leading mold removal and mold remediation experts.
Yeah, g'day Shane, how you going?
I'm well, Bob. How are you? What's happened to your hand?
I'm good. It's getting better. I got the dressing off today, so I got it operated on.
Give us a
last little wave. That's it there.
There it is.
Doesn't look impressive as what I did this morning. It was way up here and out there, and it was blood, and it was terrible. No, not really. No. But it was uncomfortable. And more to the point, I couldn't do the dishes. You know, it just wrecked me, that did. I love doing dishes.
Well, hey, you know, you could have always done the vacuuming with one hand.
And I also lie. But I got the plaster off and the dressing off, and it's fantastic. There's a few stitches in my palm, and it's a crisscross pattern they've put in. So it won't shrink up again. It'll shrink in crisscross pattern.
Okay.
But no, there's hardly any pain. It's fine. I drove my car today, went to a job, and it was fine. I'm a bit excited about John and Ben Davidson.
Yeah.
They're survivalists. That's the reason why they've been invited on. They've run a pretty big business, a manufacturing business in China for quite some time now. And of course, they're in lockdown. They can't get back to China. They go to China pretty regularly. And what they do, they manufacture uniforms for big sporting events, and they sell merchandise through these sporting events. So obviously, there's no sporting events happening anymore. So their work is pretty well dried up.
You'd need to be a survivalist, Bob. Things are slowly returning to, I wouldn't say normal, but returning to a point of normality. So, you know, hopefully for these guys, the future will be favourable and things will return. But some of the somebody said to me only today, you know, because somebody in our circle of friends passed away quite young, and obviously it would be a big funeral, and you know, the numbers were limited to 50 or something like that. And the comment was made, you know, you can have thousands of people protest in the street, but you can only have 50 people at a funeral. There's a lot of inconsistencies through all of this.
Sure is. Yeah, there sure is. Yeah, well, John is retired, but Ben is, you know, about your age, and he's got a whole life ahead of him. And they're reinventing themselves. Not completely sure what they're doing, but they manufactured a sanitizer. They're using I'll let them talk about it anyway, what they're actually doing.
Look, if you're going to think outside of the square and reinvent yourself, now is the time.
Sure is, yeah, I think so too. How are you, John?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks, mate.
That's a shot. Do you need a whiskey to calm down a little bit?
I'm calm enough, don't worry.
Well, don't be too calm.
I'll take you up on the...
All right, yeah. Welcome to the Bobcast. You guys have been invited on because, as far as I'm concerned, you guys are survivors. You've survived in business for a long while. You've got a road hump at the moment, and you're going to keep on surviving as far as I'm concerned. I'm pretty sure you're thinking the same. So could you just in 30 seconds tell us a bit about yourself, John, and then maybe you can as well, Ben.
Okay, Bob, I'm 75 years old, been in business too long, looking for retirement. Always found that you needed to be a chameleon to change with your environment, and it's my belief that that's how you succeed in business.
Fantastic. You're on, Ben.
No worries. So my name's Ben Davidson. I'm General Manager of Coast to Coast Sports. I joined the family business for the first time in 1997, and we are battling COVID-19 and focused on survival for whatever comes next.
Yep, you're in the same boat as lots. I'll tell you something before we start, actually, John. I've got something in common with you, more than what you know. I used to work for Myers.
When you said you had something in common, Bob, that's a worry.
Yeah, well, I used to work for Myers. A question I want to ask you, you weren't a window dresser, were you?
No, but I know you were.
Yeah, I was a ticket writer. I was a sign writer, and then I became a ticket writer at Myers for a while. But,
Well, I was in the clothing side, and I was a menswear buyer and soft goods controller.
you're one of the guys that wouldn't talk to us.
Oh, we'd yell out everything.
I know a little bit about C2C coasting.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was asked to go down to Melbourne years ago when they were opening that big Chadstone store in Myers. And I decided I'd go and open my own menswear store at about the same time. So I didn't go down to Melbourne for that.
What does C2C stand for? What do you do?
Well, C2C is a derivation or some letters and numerals to say coast to coast. And that's the name of our business, Coast to Coast Sports. And we've always been a supplier of clothing and uniforms for sport and business and schools. But generally, that'd be our background.
Okay, so you manufacture in China and you have office staff in Port Macquarie. You have office staff in China and Port Macquarie, don't you? That's correct? Just want to get a bit of background in how you're running your business.
Ben, you might talk about that.
No worries. So currently we have a digital marketing team in the Philippines. We have office staff here in Port Macquarie with sales agents around Australia, and we have a sourcing office in China which manages all of our production. We source not only from China but Pakistan, America, India, Bangladesh, and really anywhere where our products need to come from. We've imported machines from Italy, Japan, and so there's no real limit to where we would work from or with.
That's pretty broad, isn't it? How do you go?
Sorry. Ben, how have you coped keeping a team in so many places and suppliers in so many places? How have you managed to do that with all of the restrictions that we're coming out of?
It's certainly been a challenge. Places like China experienced COVID-19 first, so our supply channels and our ability for our staff to work were probably at two different speeds. Luckily, we've always communicated online. We use, Google Docs, Google Drive, etc. So that's a big collaboration tool that can be used anywhere. And we're used to using Skype and Zoom and Google Meet, etc. And that's across all of our suppliers and all of our staff. So that side wasn't impacted. It was just the shutdowns in each country. It's had a huge roll-on effect. It was, from that point on, it was just huge disruption to nearly every channel chain. It was, and still to this moment, freight alone has been disrupted severely And then until passenger airlines come back on board, a lot of that capacity is just missing from the market, and the prices have gone up accordingly.
Managed to keep staff employed, or if you're going down to a skeleton staff, how are you handling that?
So fortunately, before the measures came into place, especially in Australia with JobKeeper, we asked our staff if they would go on to half wages, and they all agreed to do that. And then it wasn't until after that the JobKeeper program came into place. So that was our first measure, I guess, in dealing with the virus.
Is there much difference in how staff operate in China and the Philippines and other areas where you're operating from? Is there much difference how they operate than how you would expect them to operate in Australia?
Absolutely. The cultures are different everywhere. And my brother, Tim, who lived in China for 9 years, he would tell you the education system really determines how they think, and they learn by rote. So they learn by textbooks in China. It's quite rare to find people with initiative like us Australians would have, where if you get a problem, you work out how to solve it with as few tools as you've got. But over there, they really sit back and wait for you to provide some initiative for them or give them solutions. Whereas the Philippines are a little bit more, show a bit more initiative and a little bit more solutions oriented. And they're actually really experienced in working remotely. It's a whole industry over there. And I don't think you have to tell you about business process outsourcing to places like the Philippines.
How have you managed to diversify through all of this? Bob mentioned in the introduction that you guys had diversified, and John, you said that one of your was that you have to be a chameleon. So what have you done in respect to that?
Well, we've done a number of things. I think over the lifetime of the business, we've always changed with demand and also with technology. But in relation to the latest thing, we've done a couple of things, and probably the latest one, because we had to go to tangent, if you like, to the way that our business was operating to try and make sure we survived. And Ben's put together some very interesting things, including some hand sanitizer and some other things to do with health. And so, Ben, I think you should probably fill Shane in on that.
No worries. So we actually launched today our COVID Kickstart campaign. And a part of that is we've made it easier for people to do business with us. And that's on all of our standard products. Our credit policies have been loosened. Our minimum order quantities have been reduced. Our artwork fees and so on have been waived. And that's probably the first thing that we've done. The second thing is we've diversified into some new products to help combat the virus. And we looked at the mask business as the first thing. We did a whole lot of research. We've actually placed 3 orders but cancelled 3 times, and unfortunately we didn't get into that business because it seems to have collapsed. So what we've done is we started a safety division, and we've launched a hand sanitizer and also disinfectant type products, which are really essential and part of the back to sport guidelines. So it's complementary to our existing customers and helps us keep a conversation with them. The other thing that we're doing as well as part of this COVID Kickstart campaign is we're talking to our customers about Australian made. So there's a lot of talk about it, and people do want to get involved with it, I think, but we just hope it's not one of those things that falls by the wayside. So we're canvassing our customers at the moment about if they want us to do Australian made, we can. But knowing full well that there's no real industry in Australia for garments, it's really hard to get all the components and fabrics and machines, and the whole industry's sort of been diminished for a long time.
Do you think there'll be a resurgence in manufacturing in Australia based on what we've seen and what we're hearing about China and some other parts of the world? Do you see that happening?
Well,
sorry, Ben, I was just going to say, if I could come in there. I don't think it's a short-term proposition. The problem is in sewing and things of that nature, all of the experience is gone. So what's happened, all the good sewers and all the knowledge has gone out of the industry simply because government made Australia become a global village, and pricing came into it as the main reason for people to go to China only. And I think it'd take years for us to build up a proper workforce, I think, with the sort of abilities that we need.
But we do. I think there has to be a resurgence, because we just can't be left in the situation we were when the virus hit. It just exposed so much. So I think there will be, but it's not flick the switch. And we've got some strategies around how we're going to deal with that as well. So,
yeah, do you see the sanitising part of your business? And there's more than just sanitising, I think, isn't there? Do you see that as your Australian-made product, as your Australian-made arm?
No, it's a whole other side story about the sanitizer business and how we got into that. Definitely Australian made for sanitizer makes sense for us. To offer any product, you've got to be in the market for the long term. And the face mask business, told me that it was a boom bust cycle, whereas the sanitizer is going to be a long-term proposition for people. And for us to offer a product, you've got to have long-term supply, you've got to have reliable supply, and you've also got to have trusted, compliant supply. So for that type of product, I don't want to put people's lives at risk. I want to offer them the true compliant product according to World Health Organization standards, Therapeutic Goods Association, and that's what we've done with that. So Australian made for hand sanitizer, definitely. For our disinfectant fog sprayers and other disinfectant solutions, the machines are made in the States, and I believe disinfectants made in the UK. So, yeah.
Ben, with the hand sanitizer too, the 80% alcohol content in the ethanol is very, very important, because that's the standard that the WHO talk about. And a lot of the things that are on the market, like Blend 20 and other things, aren't anywhere near that, are they?
Yeah, there's a lot of different material solutions out there that don't meet the regulatory requirement, and therefore may not be effective in killing the virus. Look, Blend 20 is a great product, but it's 60% ethanol, and the TGA requirement is 80% ethanol.
I guess this opens up a lot of new markets for you guys too, in that expanding, diversifying medical fields.
Yes, I think we've just, our revenue was just cut off when people weren't allowed to play sport, and there was so much uncertainty. So we've had to do it. We've got to find additional revenue streams, and complementary to sport is really a bonus for us.
And it's interesting that you said before you're keeping in touch with your existing. So that's a great idea, offering them another solution to an ongoing problem. And the product you're making is for legs as well. You can keep it going.
Yeah, for us, it was also fairly low risk. So we're not manufacturing it. We're buying and selling it. We were bottling here in Port Macquarie, and that was our first foray into it. And that was just because we couldn't get any bottles anywhere in Australia. So we approached the guys at Castle to do that for us. But it was important to launch and get a product out there and start getting into the market, because if you leave it too long, you get left behind.
So how are you going to market that from now on?
So there's probably...
You need to talk, if you don't want to talk about it, you don't need to, of course.
No, happy to do that. There's two different target markets for us. One is the local market, and we've gone through a local distributor. They've done coffee. That's called Doppio or Nothing Espresso. That's Stewie Clark and the boys. And they supply to cafes, restaurants, schools, hospitality. So it's a totally different marketplace to us, but it's very local. And the locally bottled product is a real 2444 Port Macquarie story, where it's about local jobs. Now, the bulk sanitizer for the sport, that's really how we overcome some of the dangerous goods surcharge and minimum shipment type scenarios, where you just, to send anything over 500 mils, which is dangerous goods, you've straight away got these very big barriers with surcharges, because they can't drive through tunnels. It's got to be special trucks. So there's some limitations to doing Australia-wide shipment of that. It's got to be big quantity, but the local stuff, the cafes and restaurants, it's probably smaller quantity to begin with anyway. And it's the local product is using glass bottles, so they can be collected and recycled as part of Stewie Clark's closed loop recycling program that he does with milk bottles. And for those same participating cafes who he collects his milk bottles from, and also supplies his coffee and packaging, not by any coincidence, he will collect those bottles from them as well, and we will reuse them. So it's two different markets for the same product, essentially.
Yeah, and that can be ongoing. Once the sports start up again, you can tap into that as well, naturally.
We're canvassing all of our customers. That was part of the COVID kickstart, and we coined the term "play safe to stay safe." And there's just so much hurdles to overcome to get back to sport, and it's essential for us in our sportswear business to be able to help people to do that and make it easy for them. So, pretty important to us.
It's a win-win situation, really, isn't it? Helping them, helping you guys.
Good way to put it.
What do you see the future of sport, Ben? How do you see that unfold?
Well, we've been involved in lots of big stadium event merchandise. So in February, we did an event at Kudos Bank Arena for the bushfire appeal. In talking to the guys at Netball Australia and Kudos Bank Arena and other large venues, it's changing day by day, as we know, but the last conversations I had with them was, nothing this year is what they were thinking for the for the big venues. We're slowly seeing it change. I think they've allowed 50 at this stage. New Zealand, I think, just lifted all restrictions, so that's, you know, pretty positive. I think rugby was opening up their stadiums. Is that right? Did you see that?
Don't know.
No,
But Bob and I were just discussing on the intro that there's a lot of inconsistencies with who can do what and go where. You know, you can have thousands of people protesting, but you can only have 50 people at a funeral. So there's a lot of inconsistencies.
Yeah, there is, and then you've got to throw a bit of complexity in there as well with second waves and state laws, and it's still what we call a pandemic puzzle for people to get back to sport. So, yeah.
Yeah, but really, with this time, with this downtime, you're obviously thinking out of the square. You and your team, whatever the team might be, you're thinking out of the square, and there's a good chance you'll come out of this a lot stronger than what you were initially. You'll be looking at different venues, different ways to do it. I don't really have to ask you that. I can see you're doing it already.
No, it's a good question, and they say you shouldn't waste a good crisis. In some ways, it's helped us to, not helped us, it's forced us to look at certain sectors of our business that weren't profitable and not sustainable, and we've taken a fine-tooth comb, which you don't normally get a chance to do. So we've actually thrown out our major business system and implemented another one that was a tenth of the price. And we're looking at doing that with some other parts of our online business. For example, we used WooCommerce for a long time, and it was cheap and easy and flexible, and we decided we were going to upgrade to a more robust and stable managed system, and that's Shopify. But that's only one of the things. We've cleared out warehouses. We've thrown out stuff that we should have thrown out years ago, and we're still doing that. And as a result, we've been able to rent out part of our building, and that, we're going to continue to do that whilst we've got this slow period.
Well, Ben, Ben, you will forgive me I'm going to use your quote about not wasting a good crisis. That's gold. Thank you, mate.
No worries. Well, you've got no choice. Like, I in late March, I had kidney stones. I got floored and went to hospital and had an emergency stent put in. And I think by that stage, everyone was feeling a lot of pressure, and it was actually like a holiday for me. But it sort of made me regroup, put all the pessimism aside, and say, well, you've got to own this situation. You've got to chart your own course, and but I certainly had some demons to overcross there just before I got those stones out, and that sort of turned the corner for me.
This is why we invited you onto the podcast, you two. I wasn't aware of your future plans, but I knew you wouldn't just roll over and take it. I knew you would get up and have a go at whatever you can have a go at, reinvent yourself. So that's the whole idea of us inviting you guys onto it. This advice.
What advice would you guys give to any people looking to diversify or start up in business today, given the current situation and the uncertainty of the future? What's your golden nugget?
Well, from my viewpoint, I think that you're either born an entrepreneur or you're not. And for instance, if I was speaking to a dead set accountant, they like to not take risks and count numbers and things, and you need people like that. And when you're an entrepreneur, you need that more than anybody. So you need both sides of the coin, but you need to be a risk taker. But at the same time, going forward, I think the problem is that you've got to choose a business in which there's a bar to entry, because every broken down sports person these days wants to start a sportswear company. And that means that everything's bastardised for a fair amount of time. So consequently, whenever you choose anything, you've got to choose something that's robust. And I know the old saying about a moat around the business, if you can get that, whether you've got something that's protected in some ways, that's got, secrets to the business. All of those things are important. But the main thing is to have longevity in the business. Perseverance, I think, is the hardest thing, just to stay the course. And you'll have bad times. I mean, we've often wondered where the next meal will come from, but you've got to get beyond that, and you've just got to keep going.
Oh, shit, why didn't somebody tell me that before?
Perseverance is the main thing, Bob. You'd agree with that.
Why didn't someone tell me that we'd have hard times before? Damn it.
So, John, what you're saying is Colonel Sanders nailed it with his secret herbs and spices.
Well, I think it was more the beard, maybe the mo.
Yeah, a unique selling proposition is pretty important, any sort of marketplace.
And look, I think if you come back and you talk to Bob, in our area of the world, he was the first one with a product like Moisture Cure and so he's the guru in that area. So when you're talking about humidity and water problems and all that type of thing, you're the first to market. However, once that happens, it's then eroded on a daily basis. And that's the issue that we all have. We've got to be relative and relevant to what's around us.
Yeah.
Good point.
They keep changing.
Absolutely. What's the word you use, Ben, when it's when things are mucked up? I've lost it.
Disrupted?
Disrupted's the word I'm looking for. Thanks, Ben.
Or you could say it's dripping from the fan.
Well, I have a saying as well. You've got to put yourself in the way of luck. And you've effectively done that, Ben, with this new enterprise you're starting up. I can see that it's got a lot of legs. You can move into your existing customer base. You can keep on marketing this when it goes back to so-called normal, if it does. You put yourself in the way of luck.
Yeah,
Bob. You found a product, aren't you?
Yeah, look, I agree with that. In relation to the current pandemic, and assuming we'll go ahead very well, if everything's sort of lifted, say, come September, I can see where normal won't happen for about 18 months. Now, that's because there are so many things that are faceted in the business. For instance, restaurants might be back on track and 100% operational next week. But then businesses like ours, we can see it could be up to 18 months before next winter season for sport is and things like that. So it'll take a long while for everything to get back to what it was. Look, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, you guys. Ben, John, fantastic.
Yeah, great story. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your secret herbs and spices.
We might even ask you on again in 6 months to do a recap.
Well, we hope we're still here.
You'll still be here.